Welcome to the LTC podcast, where we bring people from across the industry together to talk about what really makes the hospitality industry shine: the people. We will offer insights, guidance, and best practices when it comes to caring for the licensed hospitality workforce. In each episode, we'll be sitting down with someone from the industry or an expert in their field. We're diving into the real stuff, the challenges, the triumphs, and everything in between, to figure out how we can make our workplace better and happier for everyone. Our mission, it's pretty simple. We want to make sure that those of us in hospitality aren't just serving others, but also taking great care of ourselves and our colleagues. Hi Jess, thanks so much for coming back to talk to us today. Could you just very quickly tell us who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So I am a nutrition practitioner based here in London. I studied personalised nutrition and I have a big focus on chronic fatigue syndrome, but also mental health and infertility. So that's the core of my practice. So I help a range of people from high performers to couples struggling to conceive. And I'm really excited today to talk about nutrition for mental health because it's definitely an area that needs a little bit more light shined.
So can you explain personalised nutrition and how that links to our mental health?
Absolutely. So personalised nutrition is all about the individual and what makes them unique. It's not a one-size-fits-all model, which makes my job a little bit more complicated because if, say, someone came to me with depression and another person came to me with depression, they would not be getting the same plan. It could be completely different in what they're exposed to in their environment, to their diet, to early childhood traumas. All of that is very important to understand so that I can tailor my approach and my recommendations to that individual. So when it comes to mental health and nutrition, if we talk about kind of people, when they think of mental health, they might think of depression and anxiety. So if we talk about those areas, more so depression, diet can have such an impact when it comes to depression. And there was a fantastic study down in Australia called the SMILES trial. And what they did is they took, I think it was about 85 clinically depressed individuals, and they changed their diet. And within 3 months, some of those people with depression were no longer on medication. And that was changing their diet in a personalised way. So when it comes to nutrition and personalised nutrition, it really can play an important role alongside other therapies when it comes to our mental health.
That's amazing. Was that study done? They didn't do anything else. It was purely just nutrition.
Purely diet. So they modified the Mediterranean diet. So the Mediterranean diet is full of things like polyphenols. So when you think polyphenols, think like brightly coloured foods like your berries, your vegetables. They had high essential fatty acids, so a range of oily fishes like your salmon and extra virgin olive oil, all these really healthy fats, and increased things like fiber. And that was what the patients with depression were put on, and they saw profound, like the study became so famous and groundbreaking for nutritional psychiatry as the industry. It was on the front pages of many journals, and it really, because nutrition, especially when it comes to kind of complex conditions, there's a lot of kind of, especially in the past, now there's been so much more research come out about how important nutrition is, that a lot of eyes would be rolled. You know, I know when that study was done, they really struggled to get funding. And I was actually grateful enough to get back before I did my master's, I got a research internship with it's the Food and Move Centre down the Deakin University in Melbourne, Australia. And I got to see the Professor Felice Jacko is the head professor there. The changes she is making, the studies they are doing is just incredible when it comes to nutritional psychiatry. But back when they were doing that, they really struggled. I think it was back in 2010 or it might have been 2012. Can't remember the exact year. But they really struggled to get funding because there was so many eyes rolled saying, oh, nutrition isn't good. And it is incredibly difficult to do studies like that because you're asking, certain people with depression who really struggle to have any kind of some are housebound, bedbound, to make quite big changes like their diet. So it was a very difficult study to do, but the outcome was just amazing.
Yeah, wow. So glad that, takes those people to really pioneer these things to make those
Exactly.
changes. I think it's also important to remember when we talk about mental health, often we think about, people who are suffering with poor mental health, but also we need to remember that we all have mental health, and it's something that we
Exactly.
need to think about all the time. And it's not just when things go wrong. I'm obviously when you're talking about like doing these trials and things, and looking at nutrition for poor mental health, but also like the huge population who don't suffer with like diagnosed mental health issues, but we all
Exactly.
like have mental health like highs and lows.
Absolutely. It's a spectrum. And so easily, I know like many, many years ago, if you were found out to have some sort of mental disorder, people were thinking there was something seriously wrong with you. So there was almost this shame around it. And it's really amazing now to see the people coming forward and talking so much about mental health. There's a spectrum, and so many people just, they don't communicate, they don't talk, and it can be really, really dangerous. And it just goes to show that mental health is, it's a really important area, really important area.
So what is the link between stress and depression?
Okay, so stress. First, let's start off by saying stress comes in many different disguises. It's not just financial stress or social stresses that people are consciously aware of. There's also these invisible stressors that people could be experiencing, like physical ailments, inflammation in the body, overtraining. These are stresses as well. So, and even things like not sleeping well, that's a stress on the body. So there's many different disguises of stressors. Now, when you're exposed to a lot of stressors that are sending a signal to your brain saying, right, we're in fight or flight, we're preparing for action, that is putting you in what's called the sympathetic nervous response. Okay, so the other nervous response is called the parasympathetic. Now that's rest and digest, heal and repair. But when we're exposed to a lot of stressors, which we are nowadays, and the brain is sending off the same signaling as if you were running from a bear or you are worried about paying your mortgage. The same physiological response is happening. Okay, now that can be quite like, when I say wear and tear, like, I mean, it can create a lot of inflammation. It can dysregulate what's called our microbiome, our microbiota, our gut lining, okay, which can be quite inflammatory. Now, I often say to clients, when you're exposed to so many stressors like that, and you get into a pattern of potentially not sleeping, a lot of physiological things can happen to the body. But it's almost like pressing on the accelerator of your car with the handbrake up. Okay, now if you're doing that for so long, day in, day out, what'll happen? The engine will break. So what'll happen to your body is these stress hormones that are being pushed out, they can no longer keep up with that output, and then you get chronic fatigue. Okay, because your body can no longer keep up with those chemical outputs. Now, what happens with the connection with stress and depression is when you're pushing out those hormones, cortisol is one that maybe people might be familiar of. When you're pushing out cortisol, what can happen is, so everyone might be familiar with serotonin. It's our feel-good hormone. It's also responsible for pleasure, pain perceptions, memory. Serotonin is very, very important. But when we push out cortisol, okay, it can send a signal to our serotonin pathways to say, we're not converting to serotonin. We're going to convert off to what's called quinolinic acid. And all you need to be familiar with that is it's quite neurotoxic, okay? And so you're not getting appropriate output of serotonin because the cortisol is pushing what's called tryptophan. It's in what we get from amino acid. This is how we make serotonin, and that's from food. But cortisol will say, okay, no, we don't want to push this down the serotonin pathway. Let's make this lovely neurotoxic chemical. And then people can get into this vicious cycle. And that can be one of the major connections with stress and depression. But what we see in the literature, like depression can be associated with early childhood traumas. So then when people are living their life, they can be exposed to things that can set off that internal stress response. And so when we're thinking of it, what is the mechanism there? Because in research, we can just see kind of correlations, not causation. So we want to understand, and this is where personalized medicine, personalized nutrition comes in, because we're looking at that individual. And we're assessing all of those things. Is there early childhood traumas? Is there inflammation in the body that we need to address? Is it their microbiome? How is their gut health? Is there depression associated with their IBS? Because there's so much fascinating research around our gut microbiome and depression and specific strains of beneficial bacteria. And I use this in clinical practice with my depressive clients. I put in specific strains of probiotics that are really heavily researched. But when we come back to stress and the mechanism of stress, there are multiple things, but this is where the personalized approach comes in. We want to assess all of those areas and see what the appropriate thing for that individual is, alongside psychotherapy and then the lifestyle and nutrition to address all of those areas. It's certainly not a quick fix.
So what is the link between our gut health and depression then?
Okay, so just like what I said about the stress response, okay, when we have that high output of cortisol, let's say, it can damage our gut lining, okay? So cortisol can create muscle damage, and the lining of our intestine is a muscle. Now, when that happens, it can create inflammation and a dysregulation of our gut microbiome. Now, depression is known as an inflammatory condition. So there's 3 important aspects I always look at the core of my clinical practice, and it's resilience, so stress hormone output, microbiome, okay, so what their microbes are like, what's their gut health like, and inflammation, okay, because all those three things can activate each other. So when there's a dysregulation in the microbiome, then there's stress hormone output and inflammation.
How do you test for those things?
So I do stool tests with my clients. I look at their microbiome. Now, what we can do now is we can look at the DNA of the microbiome in the stool sample, which can give us an idea around diversity of the microbiome. But it's also important to coincide that with other markers like digestion and absorption, inflammation like calprotectin in the gut. That's the marker calprotectin, but also the immune response in the gut called secretory IgA, and then other markers as well like short chain fatty acids. All of those are really important to understand when we're looking at the functioning of an individual's gut health. So when we're looking at those 3 core elements, the stress, the microbiome, and inflammation, all of that is core for depression. So I always start with the gut, because we want to get a balance of the microbiome. We want to make sure they're digesting and absorbing, because all of those nutrients from our foods, they get carried to make our neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine. So it's really important to establish good gut health when we're thinking of our mental health.
Are there any particular foods that are important to consider when thinking about our mental health?
Absolutely. So going back to that SMILES trial that we discussed at the beginning, so the Mediterranean diet is very high in healthy fats, our variety of fruits and vegetables, fiber, good proteins. These foods all contain important things like omega-3s and those polyphenols, but also proteins like our amino acids, like tryptophan. Tryptophan is responsible for making serotonin, but we need omega-3s to help with the conversion of the tryptophan to serotonin. And then the same goes for all the other micronutrients like our B vitamins, zinc, vitamin C. We need all of those nutrients from our foods to convert these compounds to our neurotransmitters. So that's just serotonin. Then we've got dopamine. Dopamine is our reward pathway. We need things like tyrosine and again amino acid from our foods. So where do we get all of these amino acids? So things like turkey, nuts and seeds, all of these foods that contain these amino acids are so critical. And then you've got all the brightly coloured foods, all your fibres that will contain things like your B vitamins and your vitamin C's, and then your oily fish and your nuts like walnuts, flax seeds will contain your omegas, your omega-3s in particular. So all of those foods are important when we're thinking of how can we make more serotonin? How can we make more dopamine? That's what everyone, wants. Who doesn't want more of these neurotransmitters? But it's all good and well eating the foods. You want to make sure you've got those foundations with your gut health. And also, another really important thing to discuss is exercise. So we need exercise as well to help, because exercise helps with the microbiome. But also when we exercise, we compete. So exercise, actually serotonin and protein compete with each other, and serotonin always wins. That's why we feel so great after working out.
That's insane.
Yes. Yeah. So there's exercise from lifestyle perspectives, such stress management, they're all important, but so are the foods.
Is there if you say so exercise and then like eating healthy food, is there if you were looking at kind of like eating for your mental health, is there a way of doing it? Like, should you eat and then then exercise, or exercise then eat? Is there a kind of, I don't know, secret recipe to making sure that you're being as efficient as possible?
Well, I like to say to my clients, it's always nice to go for a walk after you have had a meal. It doesn't have to be the 3 meals a day. Even one after lunch, going for a nice walk, it actually supports your metabolism and your microbiome. Now, I wouldn't advocate you have a main meal and then go do a HIIT workout, because a lot of people won't be able to tolerate that. But going for a nice walk after you have a meal can actually be really encouraging for your microbiome and your metabolism.
So is there a link between poor sleep and our mental health?
Absolutely. So remember I mentioned about the conversion of tryptophan to serotonin. Well, serotonin converts to melatonin. Melatonin is our sleep hormone. So when people are suffering with depression, they have issues with sleep, so they can have insomnia. And it can be around this serotonin-melatonin conversion. So, and then vice versa, people who struggle with sleep, it can lead to depression as well.
Oh, wow.
Because sleep, it's so powerful and it's so underrated. Sleep helps the body repair. It's like a reset button for the next day. And what happens is, if we have poor sleep or we're not getting enough hours of sleep, it can lead to things like blood sugar dysregulation later in the day, which causes you to eat the foods that you like, processed foods, things like that you know it isn't right. But what can happen is people can get caught in this vicious cycle. In the last episode that I was on, we discussed about blood sugar and energy, and we touched a bit on sleep. But when we're looking at it in the context of depression, when your blood sugars are dysregulated like that, and you're eating all the processed foods, the high refined sugar all the time, then that creates inflammation, and it comes back to those core 3 pillars I'm talking about. So you get inflammation, then you're going to get dysregulation of the microbiome, so dysbiosis, poor gut health, and then that activates stress hormones, and then it's a vicious cycle. So sleep is so critical. I actually started wearing a Whoop, so just to track my sleep. My husband said, I don't know if this is a great idea for you to be doing this, because I love the data and I'm there really looking into it every day. But it's one of the more accurate devices I've seen out there to track your sleep. And it looks at your recovery as well. So it based on your heart rate around how you've recovered in your sleep and when you should do your workouts. And that for me is really helpful because I'm running a business. I maybe only get certain times to work out. But if I can see on my Whoop, oh, okay, my sleep wasn't so great, my recovery wasn't so great yesterday, then I'm not going to push a workout today. It would actually make more sense if I did meditation or yoga or restorative work. That would be more beneficial for my body than going pushing a high intensity workout, because that would just put me in a deficit again the next day. And then on the Whoop, it tells you when you're in a high stress. It'll go by levels and it'll tell you when you're in a high stress zone.
Is that just from your heart rate?
Just your heart rate. That's what it's mainly measuring. And I'll know then it would be so much more better for my body and my recovery. I will get more benefits if I did something like yoga or something stretches or Pilates, something more restorative, rather than pushing a HIIT workout. If I pushed a HIIT workout when I wasn't maybe recovered or didn't sleep well, it would have created more stress and I probably would have been in more of a deficit than the next day. So it is important to listen to your body. Now, I don't recommend these devices for everyone, like my chronic fatigue syndrome clients. I wouldn't recommend they wear devices like that, because it can be when you're really unwell and it's only telling you what you already know. It's not great from, I don't think, this is just my opinion, from a psychological perspective. Mm-hmm. But if you're an individual, you know, you don't have any diagnoses and you're looking to optimize your health, I think having a device like that can be really good and useful, so that you'll know, okay, I slept well yesterday, now I'm going to go and do that long run today. Or I didn't sleep so well yesterday, this is when I'll have my rest day or do my stretches. So you'll know when not to push on the accelerator with the handbrake up.
I was listening to a podcast recently and it was a sleep expert speaking about how to look at your sleep and how you can improve your sleep. And she said that one of the best things you can do for your overall well-being and your sleep is to go to bed and wake up at the same time every
exactly.
night. And even just by doing that, I mean, there's probably some science that I don't know, but that is one of the best things that you can do. And over time, she was kind of explaining how her body now, she has this natural body clock, and you know, she caveats it and says it's obviously not always possible, because if you're traveling or if you're working shift patterns or if you're parents, or, you know, there's definitely times when you can't do it, but when you can, that you should really try and do that.
Absolutely. And that comes down to our circadian rhythm. And we are a creature of habits where we need routine. So when we give our body, our microbiome needs routine. Our microbiome needs diversity, but it needs routine. And our sleep needs routine. And this is where it can become difficult for shift workers and parents. And I think for those individuals, I think that's the extreme side, insomnia aside, but if you can establish some form of routine where you can, that will benefit you. And that can be something like even just your foods, still eating at the same times and trying to establish, you know, good foods within that routine. That can help your sleep. Or the negative impact of a poor night's sleep. So yes, I think my sleep pattern, travel aside, even when I travel, I still try to stay within the time zone of, you know, it can be difficult, but I really try. So what they say is if you can be asleep at 10 p.m., stay asleep between 10 and 4. And then definitely asleep before 12 a.m. because once you're awake past 12 a.m., your stress hormones are activated. And we need these stress hormones. They're so important. Cortisol is what gets us out of bed in the morning, but it's supposed to drop off and be the lowest at night. So that's our circadian rhythm. If we're sleeping within a certain pattern, then that's going to help our sleep. It's going to do wonders for our sleep.
So what do you think about taking supplements for sleep?
So it's really individual. Some of my clients, it's honestly been the holy grail, like things like a magnesium glycinate in the evening, or a melatonin like cherry juice. It has to be a certain type of cherry, tart cherry, that has high melatonin naturally in it. And anything that's kind of going to calm the nervous system, potentially work on the stress response. Again, it needs to be monitored by a practitioner because the dosages are quite specific. And if these individuals are on any form of sleep medication, so many supplements can be contraindicated. And this is where supplements can get really dangerous, because people are just buying off influencers on social media who think they know, there is so much background to supplements that has to be monitored if any individual is on medication. And when we're looking at supplements, it's not necessarily to replace anything. It's a temporary kind of helping a specific mechanism, and then you don't want to rely on that supplement. Then you kind of want to get to your baseline, and it's just going to help you, because magnesium deficiency can lead to sleep issues. And magnesium, I know I mentioned it in the last episode, is so deficient, especially for women. It's so important for our hormones, and men need more than women as well. So yes, supplements can be really helpful when monitored, because there's like some supplements you can just buy off the shelf, or the dosage it's not going to do much, and you're not really getting much of a response. And then people think, oh, is there something even more wrong? And I think it gives off the wrong message. So, and I'm all for, I don't think there should only be a certain amount of people from a economic background, let's say, that can afford these type of therapies. I think it should be accessible to everyone. It doesn't have to be so complicated. Like nutrition and lifestyle, it can be like easy. Even eating healthy there's been studies to show that it's actually cheaper than the not so healthy foods. So I would certainly start with your diet and your lifestyle. Look at that first. Make sure that you're getting your daily recommended intake of your nutrients from your foods. You're doing things like exercise, you're doing stress management, deep breathing. I know meditation isn't for everyone, and I definitely I'm not the practitioner to force. I would never force anyone to do something and that can be the messaging around meditation, is like, oh, you have to sit. But there's meditation in so many different practices, like walking, that can be a form of meditation. Art, that can be a form of meditation. So finding the thing that brings you joy can be so great for your nervous system. All of these, a lot of these things are free. So I would kind of go in with supplements, because the people that are coming to see me have probably been suffering for quite a long time. They've exhausted their resources. So we really need to go quite individual and personalised. So we're going in with therapeutic dosages of specific nutrients, but not in all cases.
What lifestyle factors then are important for mental health?
Okay, so I touched a little bit on yoga. Great if meditation, deep breathing, the research that's coming out now about deep breathing is just amazing. Cold water therapy can be great, but I find that can be kind of one side of the spectrum. And because of all the information, like there's so much noise out there at the moment, that it takes away from the things that people think they need to be doing the extreme.
Well, you just think you should be doing all of it as well, right? Like, and you're just like, well, I've got no time to do any of it, so I'm going to do nothing.
Yes, and really, if you can get consistency with doing some workouts, doing some things like maybe the yoga or the deep breathing, or just getting that consistency over a while, because there's also this false messaging that it'll just happen for you tomorrow, that it's a quick fix. These things are not a quick fix. Sometimes I'm saying to my clients, it can take up to 3 months before you really start to notice pattern change. And it can take up to 55 days to really change a habit as well. So, and then there's others, 2 weeks could pass by and they're starting to really notice benefits. So again, very individualized. But from a lifestyle perspective, I would certainly advocate doing anything that brings you joy and that can settle that nervous system. So anything that will send signals to your brain to let your brain know you are safe and to shift you into that parasympathetic nervous response. So I always like to ask my clients, what do they really enjoy? What is the thing that they're not doing or they would love to have more time to do? And it's so lovely when people turn around and say, well, I used to paint before I had children and I really enjoy doing it, or I don't have time anymore to do crocheting or something and when you encourage them to get back into doing those hobbies that they really enjoyed, you notice such a difference in their stress response. So I really am an advocate for finding the thing that brings you joy and finding that doesn't feel like a chore.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, it can feel like a chore and then they can feel quite resentful for doing that thing. It's kind of like me in running. I'm really trying, like I really want to love running, but it stresses me out. So I don't do it.
Yeah.
And even if I'll go for a brisk walk and I'm like, maybe I'll try a light jog. No, not for me. And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's okay. I love other things. That is my exercise. And so I know for cold therapy, no one liked cold therapy at the beginning. Yeah. But that can be quite easily, you really feel the benefits afterwards. Like you could start off with, at the end of your shower, 10 seconds turning it to cold. Yeah. And then building it up that way.
Yeah. I saw somebody recently who had tried the cold shower thing, like couldn't cope with it. Like literally was like, I can't cope. So what she does now is she fills up a bowl of cold water, puts some ice in it and like just dips her face in
it. Yeah.
And that is so much more tolerable. And she does it like first thing in the morning, like when she's brushing her teeth.
Yeah.
And so she's then hoping that she'll start gradually then being able to work up going back to the cold showers.
Good for her.
And I was like, that's such an amazing way of doing it. And I've started doing something not quite that far, but in the morning, instead of washing my face with like hot water, I use cold water.
Yeah.
And it just that I was like is amazing, and you do feel so much better from it.
Yeah. I'm definitely more of I love the warmth. So I do things like infrared sauna. So I have an infrared sauna blanket at home.
I don't know what that is.
So infrared really has so many benefits to it. It helps with our mitochondria communicate, like respond to infrared, but also our nervous system. It can be quite good for our nervous system, our lymphatic system. There's a lot of benefits to infrared, and I do that. I do my meditation in an infrared blanket, and really I find a lot of benefit from it. Now you can go to different levels on a sauna blanket if you really want to sweat, because there's a lot of research around, it can just help with burning fat as well. Like if you make it really, really hot, because you'd sweat quite a lot in it. I do it more for kind of meditation, those types of benefits. And I'm just trying to think of other lifestyle factors. There's definitely a big, I think like with all of the noise that's out there at the moment, there are so many things we can do. So many things we can do. I really think it's just about finding the thing that works for you, but that is a healthy habit and not has a negative impact on your lifestyle.
What about like daylight and like getting out in
Absolutely.
nature? I mean, which is obviously harder to do in the winter, because if you've got work, then you're less likely to be able to get out in daylight hours in the morning and the evening, that's when you might have some more free time. But that has huge impacts on our mental health.
Yes, and that brings us into vitamin D, because vitamin D also has a positive impact on serotonin. And there's been research connecting vitamin D deficiency and depression. But also for our circadian rhythm, we need to see daylight and we need to see darkness. That's how our circadian rhythm works. And for some people, they're going to work and it's dark, and they're coming home and it's dark, and they maybe haven't left the office. So for those individuals, I always encourage them to go outside for a walk after lunch and just get that daylight, sit in a bench in the park around the corner, do some deep breaths. You know, don't be looking at your phone, or because, you know, the phone is just another stress.
Yeah.
You know, especially there's been some research around in neuroscience. If you check your phone first thing in the morning, like social media, you're constantly chasing that dopamine response. It affects your dopamine levels for the rest of the day, and then you're constantly trying to just chase that dopamine response. So in the morning, it's good to have a morning routine where you don't check your phone for at least, 30 minutes. Get some daylight in. I know it can be hard in the winter depending on what time you're waking up at, but if you can get some form of daylight when you can get these light bulbs now that are daylight, not artificial light. So getting the daylight in the morning and not having caffeine straight away, because our body's natural alertness is already quite high in the morning, and if you have a caffeine hit, you're just getting more of that alertness. It's best to just ease yourself into the day, and then that can have such a positive impact on your mental health.
Amazing. Okay, one last question. I'm going to the supermarket and I need to fill up a trolley and I want to buy foods specifically to help me with my mental health. What am I buying?
Okay, so we'll cover, what we'll do is we'll do vegan as well.
Okay.
So for those that do eat animal products and those that don't. So for those that do eat animal products, okay, the first place I'll be going to is your fruits and vegetables. Getting and this is for vegans as well, getting as much polyphenols, so as much colour as you can, from grapes to pomegranate seeds to avocados, all your leafy greens, okay? All of those foods are containing fibre, your micronutrients that I discussed. Also, you've got some healthy fats, and you've also got things like vitamin E in your avocado, okay? So really filling that should be at least a third of, if not a little bit more, of your shopping basket. Don't leave out the herbs. I always encourage my clients to go to a new herb each week, whether it's parsley, whether it's fresh basil, that you want to get that variety. Again, we're thinking of fueling our microbiome here and really encouraging them with prebiotics. Okay, the prebiotics from these foods are what feed the bacteria in your gut, okay, to offset these beneficial effects. So getting things like herbs, getting things like all your different kind of brightly coloured fruits, and there's certain foods that is recommended to eat organic, and they're the ones that it doesn't have a shell. So like an avocado, you can eat it non-organic because you're eating the inside. A banana, you can have non-organic because you're eating the inside. The outer side protects it from the chemical sprays.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so I would always encourage, like spinach, if you can, eat organic, or even buy frozen. Berries as well, if you can, organic, especially strawberries. They're up there the worst. Also things like tomatoes, if you can, eat organic. So, but other foods, there's a lot of foods that it's okay to not eat organic as well. Or, buy things that are frozen. They're also okay. There's a lot of hype around, and I do, fresh is good, but if we're thinking of socioeconomic, we want to make sure that everyone, and frozen's fine. I get my berries frozen and I stick it in my smoothie every day. So getting those brightly coloured vegetables, getting that diversity, try and aim for 35 different foods in your basket each week, okay? And think like mushrooms. There are different types of mushrooms or different foods. So if one week you got portobello, the next week you got oyster, that's a different food. So that's where I would, certainly start with the fruit and vegetable section. Then I would be going to your fish. So you want to make sure that you're getting oily fish in your routine, because the oily fish, think of oily fish like salmon, mackerel, sardines. These are all really good oily fish that contain the omega-3s, the EPA, the DHA. Now, for vegans, to get EPA and DHA, you actually need to eat things like algae. So it's best off to supplement with algae to get the EPA and DHA. You can get omega-3 from walnuts and flax seeds, but what it converts to is what's called ALA, okay? Only a very small amount of ALA actually converts to EPA and DHA, and we want the EPA and DHA because that's anti-inflammatory, okay? So for vegans, I would potentially encourage getting some form of algae supplement to get the EPA and DHA. So your fish, then you want to get to kind of your lean proteins. So chicken, turkey, get the turkey in for the tryptophan. You want to also get red meat isn't bad. Grass-fed red meat is best. And once a week is absolutely fine. Now, if you're an individual that's low in iron, or if we're talking about vegans that need to be mindful of their iron, you get iron from vegetables as well. Okay, so, but you'd want to almost eat a bag of spinach to get and make sure your vitamin C is high to even get close to the iron that you would get from a steak.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you can get it easier from animal proteins because it's called heme iron. So whenever you think heme, think blood. Non-heme iron is from vegetables. Okay. But you need vitamin C to convert for that absorption. Okay. So they're your proteins. What I say to individuals, to get the amount of protein that you should be having a day, depending on the individual, I go between either 0.8 grams per kg of body weight or 1 gram per kg of body weight. So for example, let's say you're 60 kg, you're having 60 grams of protein. Now, one salmon fillet can be like 26 grams of protein. And, a handful of nuts can be something like 10. An egg is like 6 grams of protein. So really look at where you're getting your protein as well. So that's your protein. Then I would always go to things like nuts and seeds. Okay, get a variety of these, like your sesame, your pumpkin, your flax seeds. Really, really good, really beneficial. Walnuts, try get them raw and not roasted and salted and all this kind of that goes on with the nuts. Try get them raw as best you can. So now already we have got such high omega-3s and healthy fats. We've got good amount of protein from lean-based protein, and our fish, we've got protein there and healthy fats. We've got loads of fiber and prebiotics from our foods. And always look at things that maybe you haven't, like with the big supermarkets, especially here in the UK, they're quite good for getting like the different types of broccoli, and you can get the purple head and you can get the green. So go for the different types that you wouldn't, try not stick to the same things every week, but it's okay to, mix it up a bit and have your base. Like my clients, some of them, their core base might be sweet potatoes or rice, or, they can be your core complex carbohydrates, but, mix up the other things, the other foods. So that's and then I would go to, so depending on if you're vegan or not and you're having dairy, occasional bits of cheese and milk, you're getting your calcium from these foods. Again, there's a lot of people that have converted to non-dairy, but look at, if you are getting things like oat milk, the one thing I just want to say about oat milk is it can contain a toxin called glyphosate, which can be, when you're drinking a lot of it, can actually be more damaging for your health. And oat milk is like, it converts to sugar in the body. It's like a cup of starch, so it can really dysregulate your blood sugar levels. So if you are having non-dairy milk, maybe lean to things like almond milk. Pea can be quite nice. They won't spike your blood sugars as much as oat. And check if they're fortified with nutrients that replace the nutrients that you would get from dairy. So that's if you are an individual that doesn't have dairy. But having cheese, butter, your milks, they're all okay if you can tolerate them. So they're kind of, they would be your dairy. I would always, encourage going to things like getting some things like hummus and legumes and beans and all those types of foods if you can. bring those in, because these are so good for your gut. Really good. If you can tolerate them, especially if you're vegan, then you're really going to be leaning towards those foods for your proteins. I would definitely not encourage vegans to go to the processed proteins, because they are just not good for your health. Try stick to whole foods, so your nuts, your beans, your tempeh, your tofu. Like tofu has got loads of protein in it. It's really good for your health. And then your nuts and your seeds, all of these are high in protein as well. So that, that's a quick overview of how I would navigate someone through a shopping centre. Just try and come away from the processed foods as you can. Like, it's okay to have, treats here and there, but try keep 80% of your week of a whole food, well-balanced meal, and you can allow yourself to have that 20% for treat, because at least you've got that foundation and it's not going to have a negative impact on your health. But when it's 50-50, like it's 50% processed, high sugar, and the 50%, is still, it's okay, but it's not, that's, we'd really try to bring it to 80-20.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Oh, you're so welcome.